Show more 7 seconds. That was all it took. One breath, one movement, and a man the entire room had already written off. Too old, too quiet, too ordinary. Put the company's undefeated security champion flat on his back in front of every executive, investor, and gatekeeper in that building. Nobody laughed after that. Nobody whispered either. The only sound was Derek Kane hitting the mat and the low, controlled exhale of Nathan Cross standing over him like he hadn't even broken a sweat. Then Nathan looked up. Not at the crowd, not at the cameras, directly at Olivia Ashford, 30 years old, CEO of a billion-dollar aerospace company, and said it quietly enough that half the room had to strain to hear, "Your biggest enemy already works for you." Nobody understood what he meant yet. They would. If you're watching this for the first time, welcome. This channel is where stories like this one live. Stories about people who carry more than anyone knows, who walk into rooms where they don't belong, and who refuse to leave until something is made right. If that's the kind of story that keeps you up at night in the best possible way, hit that subscribe button right now so you never miss what comes next. Drop a like if you're already locked in. And before we go any further, leave a comment down below telling me what city and country you're watching from. I want to see exactly how far this story has traveled. Now, let's go back to the beginning. The morning started the way most bad days do, unremarkable, even a little boring. Nathan Cross left the apartment at 6:43, same as always, same scuffed work boots, same gray jacket that had survived more years than it should have, a paper coffee cup in one hand and his phone wedged in his jacket pocket playing the morning weather. He was 37 years old and looked it, not in the way of a man who had let himself go, but in the way of a man who had simply stopped performing for an audience. There were lines at the corners of his eyes that weren't from laughter. His shoulders carried a kind of stillness that didn't fit the neighborhood, the street, the ordinary Tuesday morning surrounding him. His daughter Emma had texted him at 6:15. "Good luck today, Dad. Don't be weird about it." He'd stared at that message for almost 2 full minutes before typing back, "I'm always weird about it." Her reply came immediately. "I know. Go anyway." He hadn't told her he was going. Emma had figured that out herself, apparently. Found the application she'd submitted on his behalf 3 weeks ago. The one Nathan had discovered only after receiving a confirmation email he absolutely had not requested. He'd sat at the kitchen table with that email open on his phone for a long time. Then he'd made dinner. Then he'd not said anything about it for a week and a half. Then he'd ironed his jacket, which told Emma everything she needed to know. He didn't own a suit. He'd thought about borrowing one from his neighbor Carl, who was approximately the same height but 40 pounds heavier, and decided that showing up in an oversized suit would be worse than showing up in what he actually owned. So he wore the gray jacket, dark trousers, the boots. He looked like someone who repaired things for a living, which was more or less what he had been doing for the past 4 years. Maintenance contracts, subcontracted security assessments for mid-sized commercial properties, the occasional consulting job that paid well enough to keep the lights on, and Emma in the accelerated math program she'd fought hard to get into. It was a life. It wasn't the one he'd planned, but he'd stopped needing it to be. The Ashford Group occupied the top 14 floors of a glass tower in the financial district, the kind of building designed to make you feel small before you even got through the door. Nathan walked in, gave his name at the security desk, collected his visitor badge, and took the elevator to the 31st floor, where a receptionist with the energy of someone who had been awake since before dawn directed him toward a waiting area already occupied by 11 other men. Nathan sat down and started reading the room. He'd done it automatically, without deciding to. It was the same thing he did in grocery stores, in parking structures, in his daughter's school auditorium during her junior recital last spring. Exits, 2 visible, 1 probable, behind the server station in the back corner. Cameras, 4, covering overlapping arcs, one with a slightly elevated angle that created a blind spot near the coat rack. The man by the window was watching the elevator, not the door. The man near the potted plant had checked his watch 4 times in 6 minutes and was not looking at it for the time. The other 9 men Nathan assessed quickly. Private security backgrounds mostly, some military, a couple who had the particular posture of people trained in close protection. They were all dressed better than he was. Several of them looked at him the way people look at someone who has wandered into the wrong building. One of them, big, probably 30, jaw like a construction site, leaned over to the man beside him and said something low that produced a short laugh. Nathan caught maintenance guy and didn't react. He turned his paper cup slowly in his hands and kept his eyes moving. At precisely 9 o'clock, a door opened and a woman walked in that Nathan had not expected. He'd reviewed the public profile. Olivia Ashford, CEO, MIT graduate, had taken control of her family's aerospace company at 26 after her father's sudden cardiac episode removed him from leadership. She'd tripled the company's government contract portfolio in 4 years, survived 2 hostile acquisition attempts, and was currently navigating a regulatory investigation that the financial press treated as either a non-issue or a company-ending crisis depending on which outlet you read. The photographs showed someone composed, tailored, camera-ready. The woman who walked into the waiting room looked like someone who had been in 3 meetings before 9 a.m. and expected the 4th to waste her time. She was sharp-featured, with dark eyes that moved fast and settled slower, and she was wearing a blazer she'd clearly put on in a hurry because the collar was slightly uneven on one side. She carried a tablet and a coffee that looked like it had gotten cold. She glanced across the room with the neutral expression of someone who had learned to show less than they felt, stopped briefly on Nathan, and moved on without comment. Behind her came a man Nathan pegged immediately as the problem. Derek Kane was exactly what his reputation suggested, the kind of physical presence that rooms adjusted themselves around. 6'2", built like someone who trained twice a day and wanted you to know it, wearing a fitted dark suit and an expression of permanent authority. He'd been with the Ashford Group for 6 years. Before that, private military contracting. Before that, a brief and apparently distinguished career in executive protection that had ended under circumstances nobody had put on his public file. He surveyed the waiting room with the practiced calm of a man who already knew the outcome of everything that was about to happen. His eyes landed on Nathan and stayed there for 2 seconds longer than anywhere else. Then the corner of his mouth moved. Not a smile, more like confirmation of something he'd already decided. "All right," Derek said, loud enough to address the room without raising his voice. "Here's how this works. Miss Ashford's organization is looking for a new director of executive security. You're going to demonstrate your capabilities in a controlled assessment setting. The assessment has 3 components: tactical scenario analysis, threat environment evaluation, and a direct physical competency test." He paused. "We do things differently here. The physical component comes first." Nathan set his coffee cup on the side table. The assessment room was on the same floor, through a set of double doors that opened into what was clearly a permanently installed training space. Padded floor, high ceilings, a ring area marked with tape. Several of the candidates exchanged looks that ranged from confident to quietly nervous. Derek stood at the edge of the mat and looked at the group. "I'll be the benchmark," he said simply. "You'll each take 2 minutes. The goal isn't to win. The goal is to show me how you think." The first 3 candidates went in sequence. One landed a solid combination before Derek neutralized him. The second lasted the full 2 minutes through evasion and didn't land anything meaningful. The third tried a takedown, got reversed, and tapped out at 40 seconds. The room watched with the polished attention of people who had seen a lot of assessments and were calibrating. Nathan was called last. He walked to the center of the mat and faced Derek Kane, who was loosening his wrists and watching him with the expression of someone who had already moved on mentally to whatever was happening after lunch. "You've done this before?" Derek said. It wasn't quite a question. "A few times," Nathan said. "You don't look like it." "I know." Derek moved first, a fast, controlled probe to test Nathan's response time, the kind of opening that was designed to reveal whether someone was going to flinch, freeze, or actually know what they were doing. Nathan didn't retreat. He didn't counter aggressively either. He absorbed the angle, redirected the force with the minimum necessary movement, and used Derek's own forward momentum to shift his base by 6 inches, enough to put him briefly off-center. It lasted less than 3 seconds and looked like almost nothing. But Derek's expression changed. The second exchange was faster. Derek came with more intent, reading Nathan as a real variable now rather than a formality. Nathan let him build the sequence. Read the commitment point 2 moves ahead, stepped inside the 3rd strike, applied leverage at exactly the moment Derek's weight was fully committed to the wrong foot, and put him on the mat with the kind of controlled efficiency that made it look like it had been agreed upon in advance. 7 seconds, start to finish. The room went quiet. Derek lay there for a beat, not stunned, not injured, but taking a moment that Nathan understood was about processing rather than recovery. Then he got up slowly, and his face was unreadable in a way that was different from before. Before, his face had been unreadable because nothing was interesting. Now it was unreadable because something was. He looked at Nathan for a long moment. "Where'd you train?" he asked. "A lot of places," Nathan said. Olivia Ashford had watched the entire thing from the side of the room. Nathan hadn't been looking at her directly. You never look directly at the person you're reading, you catch them at the edges. But he'd tracked her through all of it. She'd shown almost no reaction, not to the other candidates, not to the assessment. But when Nathan put Derek on the mat, something shifted in her face that she controlled quickly. Not surprise exactly, more like recalibration. After, while the other candidates were escorted to the evaluation portion, a staff member asked Nathan to wait. He waited. He was good at that. Olivia found him 15 minutes later, still standing near the wall, watching the room. "You said something," she told him. Not an opener, not small talk. She came straight to it, which Nathan respected. "Before the assessment, you said my biggest enemy already works for me." "Yes." "That's a strange thing to say to someone you've never met. It's a stranger thing to already know it and not say it." She studied him. She had the look of someone who was accustomed to people performing for her, pitching, angling, managing impressions, and was trying to figure out which version of that he was doing. When she couldn't place it, the muscles around her eyes relaxed slightly. "Walk me through it," she said. Nathan looked at the room. The man near the window during the waiting period, he wasn't watching entrances, he was watching the elevator. That's not threat assessment. That's waiting for someone specific. He paused. "Two of your current security staff who were observing the assessment this morning. They were positioned at the back. The one on the left filmed 3 minutes of the evaluations on his personal phone. That's not normal documentation behavior. Your organization has cameras for that." Olivia's expression didn't change, but she went still. "You noticed that?" "I notice most things when I'm trying to figure out if a room is safe." "And is it safe?" Nathan looked at her directly for the first time since she'd walked in. "Not as safe as you think it is." She was quiet for a moment. The tablet was at her side, forgotten. The cold coffee was somewhere she'd set it down and not retrieved. "Derek will hate this," she said. It wasn't a complaint. It was just what it was. "Derek will adapt," Nathan said. "He's good at what he does. He just hasn't had reason to think differently in a while." "And you have." He didn't answer that. There were things Nathan Cross didn't talk about in rooms he'd been in for less than 2 hours, with people he'd known for 20 minutes. Regardless of what his daughter had submitted on his behalf in a moment of optimism, he still hadn't decided how to feel about. 7-day trial, Olivia said. Director of Executive Security, provisional. Full access to protocols, personnel files, and current threat assessments. She said it the way people announce decisions they've already made, not proposing, concluding. "If you're wrong about my organization, we'll know in 7 days." "And if I'm right?" Nathan asked. She didn't hesitate. "Then I'll need you to still be standing at the end of it." She walked away before he could respond. Nathan picked up his coffee cup from where he'd left it across the room, cold, nearly empty, and stood in the middle of the quiet assessment room for a moment. He thought about Emma, who would absolutely say "I told you so" when he called her tonight. He thought about the man near the window. He thought about the phone that had been filming in a room with no reason to have a personal phone filming. He thought about a lot of things, standing there. Then he buttoned his jacket and went to find out where they were going to put him. 3 floors up, in a corner office with a view of the city that cost more per square foot than his entire apartment, Derek Kane sat down behind a desk and stared at the wall for a full minute after receiving the news. Then he looked at his phone. Then he looked at the wall again. 7 seconds, he thought. He'd been in close protection for 11 years. Nobody had put him down in 7 seconds. Nobody had been close to putting him down in 7 seconds. And the man who did it looked like he'd spent the last decade fixing HVAC systems. Derek Kane did not, as a rule, spend a lot of time thinking about people. He assessed them, filed them into categories, moved on. It was efficient. It had served him well. But he sat in that office for a while, thinking about Nathan Cross, before he finally picked up his phone and started making calls to figure out who Nathan Cross actually was. He didn't find much. That bothered him more than the mat. That evening, Nathan sat at the kitchen table with a bowl of soup he'd reheated twice and called Emma. She picked up on the first ring. "Well," she said. No preamble. No "how was your day" or "did you eat something?" Just the single word carrying approximately 4 weeks of investment. "They offered me a position." The pause lasted exactly 2 seconds. Then, "Dad, it's provisional. I don't care what it is. It's a yes from them. That means..." "Emma." "What?" "Thank you," he said, "for submitting the application." Another pause, shorter. "You're not mad?" He looked at his soup. "I'm not mad. Because I can tell when you're doing that thing where you say you're not mad, but you're a little mad." "I'm not a little mad either." "Okay," she said, and he could hear the relief and the grin mixing together in the single syllable. "So what's the job like?" Nathan thought about the man near the window, the phone filming in the assessment room. Olivia Ashford's too steady expression when he'd told her the room wasn't as safe as she thought. The particular way Derek Kane had gotten up off the mat, not like a man who'd been beaten, but like a man recalculating. "Complicated," he said. "Is it dangerous?" He was quiet for a moment. "Go do your homework," he said. "Dad?" "Emma." "Fine," she said, "but call me tomorrow. And eat something real. You sound like you only had soup." He looked at the soup. "Good night, Emma." "Night, Dad." And a brief pause. "I'm glad you went." He hung up and sat in the quiet kitchen for a while. Outside, the city made its usual noise: traffic, voices, someone's music from 2 floors up. Nathan didn't hear any of it particularly. I was running through the layout of the Ashford Group's security protocols in his head, cross-referencing the personnel files he'd been given access to, mapping the gaps. There were more gaps than there should have been. He kept coming back to one in particular, a name that appeared in the access logs for Olivia's travel schedule, with a frequency that wasn't justified by the person's official role. It was the kind of thing you'd miss if you weren't looking for it. The kind of thing that had a perfectly mundane explanation, except Nathan had spent enough time in rooms where nothing was mundane to know the difference between a coincidence and a pattern. He put the bowl in the sink, turned off the kitchen light, and went to his desk. It was going to be a long 7 days. The first thing Nathan did on his first official morning as Provisional Director of Executive Security was pull every access log from the past 90 days and spread them across the conference table in a sequence that made no sense to anyone who walked past the glass wall and looked in. Margaret, the executive floor administrator who had been with the company 11 years and treated everyone new with the patient skepticism of someone who had outlasted 4 security directors already, stopped in the doorway and looked at the paper arrangement for a moment. "That's not how we organize those," she said. "I know," Nathan said without looking up. She watched him for another few seconds. "Coffee's at the end of the hall. The machine on the left makes it stronger." "Thank you." She left. Nathan went back to the logs. What he was building wasn't a filing system. It was a map. Every access event sorted not by date but by personnel, cross-referenced against Olivia's travel schedule for the same period. Most of it was exactly what it should be: routine, repetitive, boring in the specific way that security logs are supposed to be boring. But there were clusters, small ones. Moments where someone with no operational reason to know Olivia's movement schedule had queried that information anyway. The queries were spaced out carefully, never too close enough together to trigger an automated anomaly flag. Whoever was doing it understood the system's thresholds. That told Nathan something important. You don't learn a system's thresholds by accident. At 9:15, Derek Kane appeared in the doorway with the expression of a man who had decided something and was waiting for the right moment to say it. "You're reorganizing the logs," Derek said. "Yes. That's going to make them hard to read for anyone who isn't you." "I'll make a guide," Nathan said. "You want coffee?" Margaret said the machine on the left. Derek came in and sat down across the table, which Nathan hadn't expected. He'd expected Derek to stand in the doorway a while longer, assert some territorial thing about protocol and chain of command, and eventually leave. Instead, Derek sat down, looked at the layout of papers, and was quiet for a moment. "You were special operations," Derek said. It wasn't a question. Nathan didn't answer right away. "What makes you say that?" "The way you moved yesterday. And the way you're reading these logs. You're not looking for what happened. You're looking for what the pattern is trying to hide." Derek paused. That's not a skill you learn in private contracting. Nathan straightened a stack of papers. You did your research. I tried. You don't have much of a file. No. Men with your kind of background who don't have much of a file usually don't have one for a reason. Nathan looked up at him then. Are we having a problem, Derek? Derek held his gaze for a moment, then shook his head slowly. Not yet. I'm just figuring out what you are. I'm the guy trying to find out who's leaking your principal's schedule, Nathan said. That's all you need to know right now. Derek was quiet for a moment. Then he nodded, once, and stood up. I want to be read in on whatever you find. I'll think about it. That's not, I said I'll think about it. Nathan's voice was even. Trust gets built in pieces, Derek. We're on day one. Derek left without responding, but he didn't slam the door either, which Nathan counted as something. By noon, Nathan had made 3 changes to Olivia's standard operating procedures. The first was simple. Her daily schedule would no longer be distributed as a single document. Instead, each security team member would receive only their specific segment, departure times, arrival points, their personal assignment window. Nobody would have the full picture except Nathan and Olivia herself. The second change was harder to implement. All vehicle routing decisions would be made within a 2-hour window before departure, using a randomization protocol Nathan designed himself. Nothing on paper. Everything verbal, confirmed by a code phrase that changed daily. The third change was the one that generated the most complaints. He suspended the weekly all-hands security briefings. The pushback was immediate. 3 senior staff members appeared at Nathan's temporary office before 2 o'clock, led by a man named Garrett, who had the specific energy of someone who had been comfortable for a long time and disliked the feeling of that changing. Those briefings are how we coordinate, Garrett said. He was mid-40s, thick through the chest, with the look of a man who had once been serious about fitness and had let it drift without noticing. You're creating blind spots. The briefings were creating blind spots, Nathan said. He kept his voice neutral. When 16 people know the same information at the same time, and that information keeps ending up somewhere it shouldn't, the briefing is the problem. You're saying someone in this department is feeding information out. I'm saying your routing data has been compromised 3 times in the past 6 weeks. I'm saying the compromise points align with specific briefing windows. I'm not saying anything else yet. Garrett's jaw tightened. That's an accusation without evidence. It's an observation without a conclusion, Nathan said. There's a difference. And until I find the conclusion, we operate with minimal shared intelligence. That's not negotiable. Garrett stared at him for a moment. The other 2 men with him shifted slightly in the way people shift when they're deciding whether to push or fall back. Ms. Ashford authorized this? Garrett asked. You can call her office and check, Nathan said. They left. Nathan went back to his work. He didn't fully trust that Garrett was the leak. He didn't fully trust that he wasn't either. That was the problem with this kind of situation. Everyone was a variable until they weren't. He'd learned that a long time ago in circumstances he didn't particularly want to revisit, and the lesson had cost him enough that he wasn't going to ignore it now. The first real confirmation that something was wrong came on day 3. Olivia had a lunch meeting, a private one, arranged through her personal calendar with only Nathan and her executive assistant aware of the location. No briefing, no security distribution, nothing through the standard channels. Nathan had personally confirmed the venue, personally coordinated the vehicle, and told no one on the security team where they were going until 40 minutes before departure. They took a different route than planned. Nathan made the call in the car, redirecting the driver through a one-way detour that wasn't on any itinerary. For no reason, he gave the driver except a quiet instruction to turn left instead of right at the 3rd intersection. They passed the originally planned route on a parallel street. A black SUV was parked at the corner of the block where Olivia's convoy should have passed. The engine was running. 2 men were visible in the front. Nathan clocked it in under a second as they drove by. Wrong plates for the neighborhood, angles wrong for casual parking. Both men oriented toward the street in a way that wasn't waiting for someone, it was watching for something. He didn't say anything to Olivia until they were inside the restaurant. She was reviewing something on her tablet when he leaned forward across the small table and said quietly, "We have a problem." She looked up. She had learned already, in 3 days, that Nathan Cross did not use the phrase, "we have a problem," casually. "Tell me," she said, "the route we were supposed to take. There was a vehicle staged at the intercept point. She set the tablet down. You're sure? I'm sure about the vehicle. I'm not sure about intent yet. He paused. But I rerouted us 40 minutes before departure, using a change I didn't share with anyone. So whoever placed that vehicle there had old information. Olivia's eyes were steady. Old information is still information they shouldn't have. Yes, Nathan said. She was quiet for a moment, and Nathan watched her process it. Not panic, not performance, just the particular kind of stillness that intelligent people develop when they've learned that reacting fast isn't always the same as reacting well. How long? She asked. How long what? How long has this been happening? Nathan chose his next words carefully. Long enough that whoever's running it is comfortable. They've had time to learn your patterns, your preferences, the things your security team does automatically without thinking. He paused. This isn't recent. This has been building. Olivia looked at the table for a moment. When she looked up, her face was composed, but there was something underneath it. Not fear exactly, more the particular exhaustion of someone who has been fighting on too many fronts and just found out there's another one. What do you need? She asked. I need you to trust the protocols even when they're inconvenient, Nathan said. I need you to not tell your assistant, your EA, or anyone else on your floor what we just discussed. And I need you to go through lunch like this is a normal meeting. And after lunch? After lunch, Nathan said, I'm going to find out where the vehicle was registered. The vehicle came back to a shell company with an address in Delaware that dissolved 8 months ago. Which was a dead end, except dead ends told you things too. Specifically, that whoever had set this up had resources, legal sophistication, and enough runway to establish infrastructure well in advance. This wasn't improvised. This was planned. Nathan drove the original route himself that evening, alone, in his personal car, and found the same black SUV parked 2 blocks away from where it had been that morning. He sat across the street and watched it for 20 minutes. Nobody came. Nobody left. At 40 minutes, a man came out of the building behind the parked vehicle, got in, and drove away without looking at Nathan once. Nathan wrote down the physical description, the time, the direction of travel, and a partial plate number that he confirmed against traffic camera footage the following morning, through a contact at the city transportation department he'd maintained since his contracting days. The plate was a rental. The rental was paid in cash at a location 20 miles outside the city, using an ID that later came back as a card-skimmed identity theft case from 14 months ago. Professional, careful, patient. He brought his findings to Derek on day 4. Not because he'd decided to fully trust Derek, because he needed someone with active access to the security division's internal movement logs, and Derek was the only one whose background he'd been able to verify independently. It wasn't trust, it was math. Derek listened without interrupting, which Nathan hadn't expected. He sat across from Nathan with his arms on the table, his hands still, and his jaw tight, and he listened to the whole thing. When Nathan finished, Derek was quiet for almost 10 seconds. You think it's someone in my division, Derek said. I think it's someone with access to scheduling data who understands how your division's protocols work. That's not the same as saying I know who. Derek rubbed his jaw. I've worked with these people for years. I know. Garrett's been here 8 years. I know that too. Derek looked at him. Is it Garrett? Nathan shook his head. I don't know yet, but I want you to start watching how information moves through your team. Not surveillance, just observation. Who asks questions they don't need to ask? Who's where when they shouldn't need to be somewhere? Derek was quiet for a moment. Nathan could see the thing happening behind his eyes. The particular discomfort of being asked to look at people you've relied on with a different kind of attention. It was a hard thing to ask of someone. It was a necessary one. You do this a lot? Derek asked. This kind of work? Reading people like they're a problem to solve. I used to do it more, Nathan said. And then you stopped. And then I stopped, Nathan said, in a tone that indicated the conversation was ending there. Derek nodded slowly. Okay, he said. I'll watch. On day 5, the GPS trackers appeared. Nathan found the first one during a routine sweep of Olivia's primary armored vehicle, a sweep he'd ordered conducted outside the building's parking structure by a team of 2 he'd selected himself, using equipment he'd brought in from an independent vendor rather than the organization's own tech supply chain. The tracker was sophisticated. embedded in a magnetic housing behind the rear wheel well, designed to look like manufacturer hardware if you weren't specifically looking for it. He found 2 more in the secondary vehicles before noon. He didn't remove them. He documented them, photographed them, and left them exactly where they were. Then he went upstairs and sat in Olivia's office and told her calmly that her entire convoy had been under active GPS surveillance for an unknown period of time. The silence in the room lasted a few seconds. "You left them in?" she said. "If I pull them, whoever's monitoring knows their access has been compromised. Right now they think they're still seeing everything." He paused. "That's an advantage I'd rather use than burn." Olivia set down her pen. "You want to feed them false data?" "Eventually. Right now I want to see what they do with the real data. Specifically, whether they move any assets before we've run a route." She was quiet for a moment. "How many people know about this?" "You, Derek, me. Not Rachel?" Rachel Bennett was the operations director. Mid-30s, former logistics coordinator for a defense contractor, steady and precise in a way Nathan had noticed and respected without being able to fully verify yet. "Not yet," Nathan said. Olivia held his gaze. "Nathan, Rachel has been with me longer than anyone in this building." "I know, that doesn't change the protocol." She looked like she wanted to push back on that. She didn't. Which told Nathan something about her that he filed away quietly. She could hold a position she disagreed with when the reasoning was sound. That was rarer than it should have been. 2 days later, Nathan used the trackers. He fed a modified route into the system, not through the normal scheduling channel, but in a way that would be visible to anyone monitoring the vehicle GPS data. The route had a specific choke point, a narrow service road along the river's east side that Olivia's convoy had used exactly twice in 3 months. The road had 1 entry and 1 exit. If someone acted on the GPS data, they'd position there. Nathan didn't send Olivia anywhere near it. He sent an empty decoy vehicle with 2 plainclothes drivers and told them to proceed at normal convoy speed and call him if anything happened. At 11:17 in the morning, they called. A panel van had pulled across the road's exit point. 3 men were visible. When the decoy convoy slowed, the van pulled forward slightly. Not far enough to be an accident, far enough to be a decision. And then, apparently noticing the absence of a second vehicle that the GPS data would have suggested was present, it backed away and left. Nathan had a partial plate. He had timestamps. He had the beginning of a chain. He also had the thing he'd been waiting for. Confirmation that the GPS data was being monitored in something close to real time. That meant someone with access to the tracking system, or someone receiving a live feed from someone who was. He called Derek from the parking structure of a hotel across the city, standing in the corner of the second floor where the cameras had a blind spot he'd mapped on his first drive-through. 3 men, Nathan said, panel van. They knew the route, and they knew the timing. They didn't expect the convoy to be running light. Derek's voice was tight on the other end. "They're reading the GPS live." "Yes." "That means someone in the building said..." "Someone with access to the fleet monitoring system," Nathan said. "That narrows it." A pause. "There are 6 people with administrative access to fleet monitoring." "Send me the list," Nathan said. "And Derek, don't send it through company channels." "How do I send it then?" Nathan told him. It took a moment, and Derek's silence had the particular quality of a man reconfiguring his understanding of what kind of situation he was actually in. "This is bigger than a leak," Derek said. "Yes," Nathan said. "How long have you known?" Nathan looked at the parking structure wall. "I suspected from the first morning. I've been building the confirmation since then." Another pause. "You could have told me sooner." "I needed to know you weren't part of it." The silence that followed was long enough to be uncomfortable, which Nathan didn't try to smooth over. Some silences needed to land where they landed. "And now?" Derek said. "Now I'm reasonably confident you're not." "Reasonably." "It's day 7, Nathan said. "I don't do certainty on day 7. He could hear Derek breathe out slowly. "Fair enough," Derek said, and something in his voice had shifted. Not agreement exactly, more the sound of a man who had stopped arguing with a situation and started working inside it. "What do we do next?" Nathan thought about the 6 names on the fleet monitoring access list. He thought about the panel van and the 3 men and the way they'd backed off when the convoy was wrong. He thought about the GPS trackers still sitting in the wheel wells of Olivia's vehicles, still broadcasting, still making someone confident they knew where she was going. We find out which of those 6 names accessed the system in the 40 minutes before the convoy ran, Nathan said. And then we get very quiet and very careful, and we wait for them to do it again. He hung up and stood in the parking structure for a moment, listening to the low hum of the ventilation system. Somewhere below him, a car alarm went off and then stopped. He thought about Emma. He thought about how she'd texted him every morning since he started, not asking anything, just variations of the same thing. You good today? And every morning he'd sent back the same variation. Yeah, you? It wasn't much, it was something. It was maybe the thing that kept the rest of it from becoming the only thing. His phone buzzed. Derek, with the access log. One name appeared in the fleet monitoring system 17 minutes before the convoy ran. One name that had no operational reason to be in that system at that time on that morning. Nathan stared at the name for a while. Then he took a photograph of the screen, put his phone in his pocket, and walked back to his car. He drove carefully, checking mirrors the way he always did now. Not paranoia, just habit, the same way some people checked locks before bed. A thing you did so it became automatic, so you didn't have to think about it when it actually mattered. Tomorrow, he thought, was going to be a difficult day. Not because of what he'd found, because of what finding it meant. That the circle was tighter than he'd hoped, the access deeper than he'd wanted. And whoever was running this operation on the outside had someone on the inside who had been trusted for a long time. The hardest betrayals always did. He knew that better than most. The name on the fleet monitoring log was Carson Reeves. Nathan sat with that for a long time before he did anything about it. Carson Reeves, 31 years old, 4 years with the Ashford Group, fleet operations coordinator with access to vehicle tracking systems, scheduling integration software, and the building's internal logistics network. Clean personnel file. No disciplinary history. Performance reviews that used words like reliable and detail-oriented in ways that sounded genuine rather than templated. Nathan had spoken to Reeves exactly once, briefly, on his second day, a corridor conversation about vehicle maintenance schedules that lasted under 4 minutes, and during which Reeves had been pleasant, efficient, and completely unremarkable. Which was, Nathan thought now, itself a kind of data point. He didn't go to Reeves directly. That was the obvious move, and obvious moves in situations like this had a way of burning everything you'd built before you'd built enough. Instead, he went back through 90 days of fleet logs with the specific lens of Reeves's access pattern, not what he'd queried, but when, and how those timing windows lined up against subsequent events in Olivia's security record. The correlation was not perfect. It was never perfect. But it was consistent enough to make Nathan's jaw tight in the way it got when something he'd hoped was wrong turned out to be right. He told Derek the following morning, in the parking structure again, standing near a concrete pillar on the 3rd level where the camera coverage was weakest. Derek listened and didn't say anything for a moment. Reeves, Derek said, like he was testing the weight of the name. The access timestamps match 4 of the 6 routing incidents I've been tracking. 4 of 6 isn't all of them. No, Nathan said, which means either he's not working alone or someone else is providing supplemental access. Either way, Reeves is a thread. I'm not ready to pull it yet. Derek rubbed the back of his neck. How long do we sit on this? Until the product launch, Derek looked up. That's 3 days. I know. Nathan, if Reeves is feeding information to whoever's running this, then they already have everything they need about the launch, Nathan said. Pulling Reeves now tells them we found the thread. They go quiet, they change channels, and we lose the trail entirely. We let it run until the launch. We control the environment. We flush them. Derek stared at him for a long moment. You've done this before. Parts of it, Nathan said. He didn't say more than that. Derek didn't push. The Ashford Group's aerospace product launch was the company's most significant public event in 3 years. A $1 billion unveiling at the Meridian Convention Center, press, investors, government contractors, 400 guests minimum. Olivia had been preparing for it for 6 months. The security footprint was substantial, 38 personnel across the venue, 3 external access points, a VIP corridor that ran from the private entrance to the main presentation hall, and a contingency protocol that Nathan had spent 2 days redesigning from scratch, because the original version had the same problem everything else in this organization had. It assumed that the threat was coming from outside. He'd submitted his revised protocol to Olivia directly. She'd read it that evening and called him at 10:15 p.m. "The secondary evacuation route," she said. "You changed it completely." "The original route ends at the North Service Corridor," Nathan said. "The North Service Corridor has 3 entry points from the street and connects to the loading dock on the east side of the building. If someone wanted to create a controlled evacuation scenario and position personnel along the exit path, the North Corridor is where they'd do it." A pause. "You think someone's going to trigger an evacuation?" "I think the original protocol routes everyone to a location that's easy to control from the outside. Whether that's intentional design or just bad planning, it doesn't matter. We're not using it. The board is going to ask about the protocol changes." "Tell them it's standard pre-event security review," Nathan said. "And if they want more detail than that?" "Then tell them their security director is thorough," Nathan said, "and leave it at that." Another pause, shorter. "Okay," she said. Then, "Nathan, the launch matters, not just financially, the contract announcement that goes with it. There are people whose jobs depend on it coming through clean." "I know," he said, "so don't let anyone burn it down." "I'll do what I can," Nathan said, which was the most honest answer he had. The morning of the launch, he arrived at the Meridian at 5:40 a.m. The venue staff didn't start until 7. He walked every corridor alone, in the half-dark, with a flashlight and a floor plan he'd already memorized, but checked anyway because that was how you did it. You didn't trust memory when the stakes were real. You trusted your eyes on the actual space. He found the maintenance tunnels on his second pass. They were in the building schematic, but not on the security team's briefing materials, which was a gap he corrected immediately, flagging them as potential movement corridors. The tunnels ran beneath the main hall and connected the east loading dock to the kitchen supply area near the VIP corridor. Not a route anyone would use for normal operations, too narrow and poorly lit, but navigable for someone who knew the building and wasn't planning to use the front door. He walked it twice, memorized it, marked the junctions. By 7 a.m., his team was in position. By 8, the venue was open to set up crew. By 9:30, early guests were arriving. Nathan stood near the VIP entrance and watched the room fill with the specific quality of attention he'd trained himself to hold. Not the tense, darting surveillance of someone expecting trouble, but the steady background awareness of someone who was tracking 100 small things simultaneously without landing too hard on any of them. Olivia arrived at 10. She looked composed, precisely turned out, and tired underneath it. The kind of tired that came from 6 months of work converging on a single morning. She glanced at Nathan when she came through the VIP entrance, and he gave her a small nod. She returned it and kept moving. The launch program began at 11. Nathan positioned himself at a point near the back of the main hall that gave him sightlines to all 3 primary exits, the VIP corridor entrance, and the 2 internal doors that connected to the service areas. Derek was at the front of the room, near the stage. 3 plainclothes team members were distributed through the crowd. 2 more were at the external access points. The first 40 minutes were exactly what they should have been. The fire alarm went off at 11:43. Not the slow escalating pulse of a test alarm. The full emergency tone, loud and immediate, filling the hall before anyone had time to process where it was coming from. The lights didn't cut, which was wrong. A standard fire protocol at the Meridian would have switched the hall to emergency lighting. The alarm was isolated to the audio system. Nathan clocked that in under 2 seconds. The crowd started moving toward the exits, specifically toward the North Service Corridor, which was the direction the venue's emergency signage pointed. 400 people following green signs in a loud room, moving fast. Nathan was already moving. He cut through the crowd against the flow, which was harder than it sounded. People pressed together, disoriented, some calm and some not, the noise making it difficult to communicate over anything less than a shout. He reached the VIP corridor in under a minute. Olivia was near the stage with 2 of her executives, one of her personal staff trying to direct her toward the north exit. "Ms. Ashford." Nathan's voice was level, but it carried. She turned. He was already at her arm, not grabbing, placing his hand at her elbow in a way that communicated direction without force. "Not that way." "The alarm is not a fire," he said. "Follow me, now." She came. That was the thing about Olivia Ashford that Nathan had learned in 10 days. When the moment required it, she could make a decision in under a second and commit to it completely. She came without another word, moving with him through the VIP corridor, past the staff access point, through a door that required a keycard Nathan had obtained from the venue manager that morning, and kept on his person instead of in the security team's shared equipment. The maintenance tunnel entrance was 30 feet past the door, behind a gray utility panel that Nathan opened without slowing down. The tunnel was low-ceilinged and smelled like concrete and old grease and something electrical. The lights were widely spaced fluorescents, maybe half of them functioning. "Where does this go?" Olivia asked, her voice steady. "East loading dock," Nathan said. "Then out." They moved fast. Nathan was ahead by half a step, one hand on the wall to track the junction points he'd memorized that morning. Behind them, the muffled pulse of the fire alarm filtered through the concrete. At the first junction, he heard it. Movement, ahead and to the left. Not loud. The specific quiet of someone trying not to make sound, which was its own kind of sound if you knew what you were listening for. He stopped, put his hand out, and Olivia stopped with him. He listened for 3 seconds. 2 people. Maybe 3. Moving through the tunnel from the eastern end. Nathan reversed direction, guiding Olivia back to the second junction, then right instead of left. A longer route, one he'd identified that morning as a secondary path. Narrower and adding 2 minutes, but avoiding the eastern section entirely. They came out through a utility exit on the building's south side, into an alley that smelled like wet pavement and exhaust. A black car, one of Derek's, running a separate plainclothes detail Nathan had arranged the night before without putting it in any system, was at the end of the alley. Olivia got in. Nathan got in beside her. The driver, a former federal agent Nathan had used twice in his contracting years, and trusted about as much as he trusted anyone, pulled away without being told to. In the back seat, Olivia was breathing hard. Controlled, but hard. Nathan could see her working to slow it down. He didn't say anything, because there was nothing useful to say in the first 30 seconds after something like that. After about a minute, she said, "The North Corridor." "Yes." "That's where they were waiting." "That's where the evacuation route pointed every person in that building," Nathan said. "If I hadn't changed the protocol 3 days ago, your entire security team would have been running crowd management at that exit while someone else was doing something else." Olivia stared at the seat back in front of her. What were they going to do? Nathan thought about what to say. "I don't know the specifics. I know the structure of it. Controlled environment, predetermined route, specific target. What they were going to do with the target once they had her, I can't tell you with certainty." "Her," Olivia said. "You," Nathan said. She didn't respond to that. Outside, the city was moving in its usual way. Indifferent, continuous, unbothered by anything that had just happened in a building 3 miles behind them. Nathan watched the mirrors and said nothing more. The photographs appeared the next morning. Not on gossip sites, that would have been easier to manage. They appeared in the Meridian Financial Review, which was not a tabloid, which meant they were submitted by someone who understood that the right outlet could make a story look like news rather than noise. The images were taken inside the convention center during the evacuation. Nathan, his hand at Olivia's elbow, close, moving fast, her face turned toward him in the tunnel entrance in a way that, in a still photograph without context, looked exactly like what someone had designed it to look like. The headline described a close personal relationship between Ashford Group CEO Olivia Ashford and her controversial new security director. The article was careful with its language, careful enough to avoid being actionable, precise enough to land its meaning without stating it. By noon, 3 financial analysts had issued statements about leadership distractions. By 2 p.m., the Ashford Group's stock had dropped 4 points. Nathan read the article at his desk and felt something cold settle in his chest. Not surprise, not panic, just the particular weight of recognizing a move you'd seen before. He was still sitting there when Derek appeared in the doorway. He looked like a man who had not slept and had been on the phone for several hours. "The board is calling an emergency meeting," Derek said. "There are people pushing to have you removed." "How many?" "Enough to make noise." Derek came in and sat down. "Garrett is leading it. 3 of the senior directors are with him. They're saying your presence is a liability." "They're not entirely wrong," Nathan said. Derek looked at him. "Don't do that." "I'm not falling on a sword, Derek. I'm just being accurate. The photographs are doing what they were designed to do. The question is what comes next. What does come next? Nathan folded the printout of the article and set it aside. Someone staged that evacuation to either physically intercept Olivia or create footage for exactly this, something to destabilize her leadership, generate board pressure, create a distraction while they execute the next move. He paused. The product launch didn't work, so they went to the backup plan, which is reputation. If you can't remove someone physically, you remove them through the people around them. He looked at Derek. They want me gone, so the next time there's an incident, I'm not in the room. Derek was quiet for a moment. What's the next incident? I don't know yet, but they've been running this for a long time. They're not going to stop because one operation failed. Outside the office, through the glass wall, Nathan could see people moving with the particular energy of a workplace that had absorbed bad news and didn't know what to do with it. Small clusters, hushed conversations, the kind of anxious stillness that preceded larger disruption. He had to tell Olivia something he'd been holding back. He'd known that morning was coming since the day he recognized the pattern. He'd hoped to have it more solidly confirmed before the moment arrived. He didn't have that option anymore. He found her in her office at 3 p.m. She was at her desk, and the desk looked the way desks look when someone has been doing something for hours and is trying to make it look like they're still in control of it. Papers not quite in order. A coffee that had been there long enough to be room temperature. Her jacket hung on the back of her chair instead of her shoulders. She looked at Nathan when he came in and said, "Tell me you have something." "I have something," he said, "but you're not going to like it." He sat down across from her. Through the window behind her, the city stretched out in the late afternoon light. Ordinary, enormous, unaware. 11 years ago, Nathan said, I was leading a classified extraction mission. Small team, 6 people, including me. We were pulling a defector out of a hostile environment. Classified route, classified timing, classified everything. He kept his voice flat, because the only way he could say this at all was to keep the feeling out of it. The location of our team was sold. Someone above me in the command structure gave away our position in exchange for money. They came in during the extraction window. We lost one man, my closest friend in the world, and I was charged with dereliction of duty, abandoning my post, because the man who sold us needed someone to blame for the breach. Olivia was very still. My record was falsified. The investigation was controlled by the same people who ran the operation. I couldn't prove what happened because every document that would have supported my account had either been altered or disappeared. I was separated from service under a cloud that never officially resolved. He paused. Emma was 6 years old. I'd been back from deployment for 11 months. Olivia's hands were flat on the desk. She didn't say anything for a moment. Why are you telling me this now? She asked. Because what happened at the Meridian yesterday, the alarm, the staged evacuation route, the photographs this morning, it's the same architecture, Nathan said. It's not the same people, but it's the same thinking. Create chaos, control the exit, take the person you want, and then if that fails, destroy their credibility instead. I've seen this before. I lived it before. He stopped. And the person running it understands organizations from the inside. They know how boards respond to pressure. They know how to make a company turn on itself. Olivia looked at him steadily. You think it's someone I trust? I think it's someone you've trusted for a long time, Nathan said. The resources behind this, the infrastructure, the patience, the legal sophistication. This didn't come from an outside competitor running a play. This came from someone with an ownership stake in the outcome. The silence in the room was long. I have people in my family who have ownership stakes in this company, Olivia said quietly. I know, Nathan said. She looked at the window. The light was going flat now, the city transitioning into early evening gray. Nathan could see her working through it. Not denial, just the particular process of someone who knows something is true and is deciding what to do with it. You've been sitting on this, she said. Not an accusation, more like confirmation. I've been building enough to say it without it being just a theory. And now? Now the board is going to meet, and people are going to push to have me removed. And if they succeed, whoever's running this moves to their next phase with significantly less interference. He paused. I need you to not let them remove me. Not because I'm asking you to trust me. You've had 10 days. You can make your own assessment. I'm asking because the next thing they do will be faster, and the security division needs someone who knows what they're actually looking at. Olivia turned back from the window and looked at him with the steady, dark eyes that Nathan had learned over 10 days missed very little. "The board meeting is at 9 a.m., she said. "I know. They're going to ask for your removal before the agenda even starts." "I know that too." She picked up her pen and turned it slowly in her fingers, not writing anything, just holding it. A habit, Nathan had noticed, that appeared when she was thinking through something she'd already half decided. "I want you at the meeting," she said. "That's not standard. I know it's not standard. I want you there anyway." She set the pen down. "If you're going to tell 9 people on my board that someone with ownership stakes in this company is trying to destroy it from the inside, you're going to tell it yourself, not through me." Nathan considered that. "There's risk in that." "There's risk in everything," Olivia said flatly. "That hasn't slowed anyone down yet." He couldn't argue with that. He stood, and for a moment the room was just the two of them in the going gray light. And Nathan thought about the extraction mission 11 years ago, and his friend Marcus's voice in the radio headset in the last seconds before everything went wrong, and how he'd carried the weight of that night in a part of himself. He'd walled off so thoroughly that he'd stopped checking whether anything still lived behind the wall. Something did. He was beginning to understand that. He walked to the door. Olivia picked up her phone. "Nathan," she said before he reached it. He stopped. "The friend you lost," she said. "What was his name?" The question landed differently than he'd expected. People didn't usually ask for the name. They asked about the mission or the charges or how he'd rebuilt afterward. The name was specific. The name was the part that was still attached to something real. "Marcus," Nathan said. "Marcus Webb." Olivia nodded, once, like she was filing it in a place that would hold it. "Thank you for telling me," she said. He left before either of them had to say anything else. In the hallway, he walked to the window at the end of the corridor and stood looking at the city for a moment. His phone buzzed. Emma's daily text, right on schedule. "You good today?" He thought about that for a second longer than usual. "Yeah," he typed back. "Getting there." He put his phone in his pocket and went back to work. There was a board meeting in less than 18 hours, and before that there was a name on a fleet monitoring log, and GPS trackers still sitting in wheel wells broadcasting to someone who thought they still had the upper hand. That part, at least, Nathan intended to correct. The board meeting was supposed to start at 9. At 8:47, Nathan's phone rang. It was Derek, and the first thing Derek said was not a greeting. "She's gone," Derek said. Nathan stopped walking. He was in the building's lobby, heading toward the elevator. "What do you mean, gone?" "Olivia. Her EA called me 2 minutes ago. She got a notification at 8:15 that there was an emergency security relocation order, came through the executive authorization system, flagged as highest priority. Her personal driver picked her up from the building's private entrance at 8:30. Nobody from my team called it in. Nobody from yours." The lobby noise continued around Nathan, the morning rotation of staff coming through the main entrance, the security desk, the elevator chime. He stood in the middle of it and felt everything in his head go very quiet and very fast at the same time. "Where's the driver taking her?" he said. "Westfield Executive Airport, private terminal." Derek's voice had the tight quality of a man holding himself level by effort. "Nathan, someone issued a relocation order using credentials I don't recognize, executive level, above my clearance tier. If Olivia is on a plane out of state before 10 a.m., the board can remove her in absentia," Nathan said. "Yeah, I know." He was already moving toward the exit. "This isn't about killing her," Nathan said. "It never was. This is about the company." "A corporate coup," Derek said. "Call Rachel Bennett. Tell her I need her. Don't use company channels. Call her personal number. Then meet me at the loading dock in 4 minutes." He hung up before Derek could respond and pushed through the building's side exit into the morning air, which was cool and smelled like rain that hadn't quite arrived. His car was in the structure across the street. He ran. The drive to Westfield Executive was 38 minutes in normal traffic. It was 8:51 a.m. If Olivia's driver had left at 8:30 and was running a direct route, he had maybe a 20-minute head start. Nathan called Rachel Bennett from the car. She answered on the second ring. "I was wondering when you'd call," she said, which was not the response Nathan had expected. "You know," he said, I know something is wrong and has been wrong for longer than anyone wanted to admit. Her voice was level, precise, the same quality Nathan had observed in the 3 interactions he'd had with her over the past 10 days and chosen to hold in a category marked probably trustworthy, unconfirmed. What do you need? I need you to pull every executive credential issuance in the past 24 hours from the authorization system and find the one that generated a security relocation order for Ms. Ashford at approximately 8:15 this morning. I need to know whose credentials were used and whether those credentials are real or forged. A brief pause. That requires administrator access. Do you have it? Yes. Then I need it in the next 15 minutes. He heard her moving, the sound of a chair, a keyboard. I'm pulling it now. Where are you? Heading to Westfield Executive. They're trying to get her on a plane. If the plane leaves the state, the board convenes under the emergency leadership provision, Rachel said. She already knew the mechanism. Nathan noted that. Martin Ashford drafted that provision 4 years ago during the regulatory review period. He said it was risk management. Nathan took a turn faster than the situation technically required. Martin Ashford, he said, Olivia's uncle. He holds 18% of the company, Rachel said. He's been on the board since the company's founding. He was her father's business partner for 20 years before the cardiac incident. A pause. And he's been very calm about everything that's been happening these past 2 weeks. Notably calm. People who are involved are always calm, Nathan said, because they know how it ends. Until they don't, Rachel said. Give me 10 minutes on the credentials. I'll call you back. He drove. The city moved around him. Other cars, traffic signals, the ordinary infrastructure of a morning that had no idea what was happening inside it. Nathan kept his speed controlled because getting stopped would cost more time than going fast would save. Derek called back at 9:03. I'm at the loading dock, Derek said. Rachel's people are pulling the authorization logs remotely. And I've got something else. The driver who picked up Olivia. He's registered as a company contractor, but I ran his ID through the system this morning, and his credentials were added to the approved contractor list 6 weeks ago. Standard background check on file. Except the contact reference for the background check is a number that's been disconnected. Forged credentials, Nathan said, all the way down. Someone built a full paper trail. Contractor ID, background verification, vehicle registration. This took time and money to set up. 6 weeks, Nathan said. They started planning this 6 weeks ago, before the launch, before the photographs. He merged onto the expressway heading west. This was always the end game. Everything else was noise designed to weaken her position so that when she disappeared into a private car at 8:30 in the morning, there was already enough chaos in the organization that nobody reacted fast enough. Derek was quiet for a moment. What's your plan when you get to the airport? I'm working on it, Nathan said. That means you don't have one yet. It means I have the beginning of one. Comforting, Derek said. I'm behind you by about 8 minutes. I took the wrong exit. Don't run lights. I've already run 2. Nathan almost said something about that and decided against it. Derek being 8 minutes behind him was annoying but not catastrophic. The airport was still 20 minutes out, and the private terminal check-in process for a flight of this kind would require at minimum another 15 minutes of ground time. If he could reach the terminal before the plane was cleared for departure, there was still room to work. The problem was the airport's aviation systems. Westfield Executive wasn't a commercial airport. It was a private facility used by corporate and charter operations, which meant the access protocols were different from a major hub. There was no TSA, no federal oversight of departures in real time, and the facility's ground control operated on a private frequency. If someone had arranged for a clean departure, filed flight plan, fueled aircraft, crew on board, the only way to stop it from the outside was to either physically block the aircraft on the tarmac or lock down the facility's aviation authorization system. Nathan couldn't do the first without resources he didn't have, but he knew someone who might be able to do the second. He called a man named Dwight Okafor, who had spent 16 years as a federal aviation systems analyst before retiring to do freelance infrastructure consulting, and who owed Nathan a favor of a specific and unspoken nature that both of them understood did not need to be articulated out loud. Dwight answered with, I was wondering when you'd surface. Westfield Executive Airport, Nathan said. Private terminal. I need you to lock the aviation authorization system for departures. Nothing takes off. A long pause. Nathan, What you're describing is temporary. 20 minutes, maybe 30. I need time to reach someone before a plane leaves. If I do that, Dwight, I wouldn't call if it wasn't necessary. Another pause. Longer this time. Then, you've got 20 minutes. After that, I've never heard of you today. That works, Nathan said. He hung up and looked at the road ahead, the expressway opening up as the city density thinned toward the airport corridor. His phone showed Rachel calling back. The credentials are forged, she said without preamble. The executive authorization that generated Olivia's relocation order was issued using Victor Hale's access credentials. Victor Hale, head of executive security for the Ashford Group, Derek's nominal superior, the man whose name appeared on the security division's organizational chart above everyone else's. Nathan had met him once, briefly, in the first 2 days. A composed man in his mid-50s with the careful demeanor of someone who had spent a career managing up. He'd been cordial with Nathan in a way that felt like professional calculation rather than warmth. Hale issued the order, Nathan said. His credentials issued it, Rachel said carefully. Whether he used them himself or whether someone accessed his credentials, he used them himself, Nathan said. The order was too clean. Someone who accessed his credentials from the outside would have left extraction artifacts in the system. You'd see the ghost of how they got in. Did you see anything like that? A brief pause. No. Hale issued the order, Nathan said again. He's been running the internal piece of this from the beginning. He had the access, the authority, and the existing trust of the division. Nobody questioned his credential use because nobody was looking at him. Nathan, Rachel said. Her voice was steady, but something underneath it had shifted. If Victor Hale is part of this, he has access to almost every security protocol in the organization. Personnel files, emergency procedures, the board communication channels. The board communication channels, Nathan said. He felt something click, click. He can listen to board communications in real time. He's had that access for 3 years, which means whoever is directing this has known every internal discussion the board has had about Olivia's leadership, every vote, every dissenting voice, every vulnerability. Nathan took the airport exit. Rachel, I need you to do something right now. I need you to get into the board communication channel and send a message through it. Something that looks like an internal update, routine language, nothing alarming. Tell them the airport operation is on schedule and the package is secure. A silence. You want to give them false confidence. I want them watching that channel instead of making phone calls for the next 20 minutes, Nathan said. If Hale or whoever he's reporting to gets nervous and starts calling in alternate resources, we lose the containment window. I can do that, Rachel said. But Nathan, the message has to come from a credentialed account or it won't read as legitimate. Whose account can you access without raising flags? Mine, she said simply. I have board-level communication access. Operations directors always have it for emergency coordination. A pause. I'll send it now. Thank you, Rachel. Find her, Rachel said and hung up. Westfield Executive Airport came into view at 9:22. It was smaller than its name suggested, a main terminal building, 2 hangar complexes, and a private terminal annex set back from the main structure behind a security gate. Nathan pulled up to the main gate, where a uniformed attendant approached his window with the particular manner of someone accustomed to dealing with people who believed their urgency was unique. Nathan showed the Ashford Group security credentials he still technically held. I need to reach the private terminal, he said. I have an executive in there who left the building without proper security escort. This is an active protection situation. The attendant looked at the credentials, looked at Nathan, looked at the credentials again. Sir, I'll need to verify. Call the facility manager, Nathan said. Right now. Tell them the Ashford Group security director is at the gate and the aviation system lock that just went into effect is connected to what's happening in your private terminal. They need to let me through. The attendant blinked. He hadn't known about the aviation lock until this moment. The surprise on his face was genuine, which meant Dwight's lockdown had gone through. It took 4 minutes that Nathan spent sitting at the gate watching the clock on his dashboard. Then the barrier lifted. He drove through without waiting for a formal wave-in. The private terminal was a separate building, glass-fronted, clean lines, the kind of space designed to make wealth feel quiet. A reception desk inside the entrance, a waiting lounge visible through the interior glass, and beyond that a corridor that led to the tarmac side boarding area. Nathan walked through the entrance fast enough that the receptionist started to speak, and then didn't, apparently deciding the situation was above her pay grade. He saw Olivia through the interior glass before he reached the corridor. She was in the boarding lounge, seated, upright, with the controlled posture of someone who had been trying to assess the situation and had been running low on options. Beside her was a man Nathan didn't recognize, business-dressed, who appeared to be engaged in a quiet but firm conversation with her. Across the room, near the tarmac door, stood two men who were not airport staff. Nathan pushed through the door into the lounge. Olivia looked up and something moved across her face that wasn't quite relief. It was sharper than that, more complicated. The expression of someone who had been calculating odds and just watched them shift. The man beside her stood up. He was late 50s, broad, with the comfortable authority of someone who expected rooms to arrange themselves around him. He had Martin Ashford's jawline. Nathan had seen photographs, had been looking at them for 2 days. And Martin Ashford's eyes, which were clever in the same way a closed door was clever, revealing nothing about what was behind it. "You're in a restricted area," Martin said. His voice was unhurried. "So is she," Nathan said, looking at Olivia. Then to Martin. "The aviation system is locked. No aircraft departs this facility until I say otherwise. Your crew has already been notified." Martin's expression didn't change, which told Nathan he'd expected some version of this. Men who had been running operations for years developed a particular composure for the moment when a plan met resistance. Not panic, not anger, just the slight recalibration of someone who had prepared contingencies. "You're overstepping your authority significantly," Martin said. Olivia was relocated for her own security. "There are threats to her safety that the threat to her safety is in this room," Nathan said. Martin looked at him for a moment. Then he did something Nathan hadn't fully anticipated. He smiled, not warmly, the smile of someone who has been at a table longer than you and knows it. "You have interesting theories, Mr. Cross." He said the name with the deliberate emphasis of someone who had looked into Nathan's background and found what was there. A man with a falsified military record and a long history of erratic judgment. "I wonder how compelling those theories will sound to the board in," he glanced at his watch, "approximately 40 minutes, when the emergency provision convenes." "The emergency provision requires a quorum," Nathan said. "And right now, 3 board members who are planning to vote with you are getting phone calls from Rachel Bennett explaining that the executive authorization that triggered this relocation used forged credentials." He paused. "Your quorum is already short." Something shifted in Martin's face. Small, a tightening near the eyes. He recovered it quickly, but it had been there. The tarmac door behind Nathan opened. Derek came through it, slightly out of breath, with the expression of a man who had just run across a parking lot and was not going to admit it. "Airport security is coming," Derek said to Nathan. "I called them before I came in, told them we had a credentialing situation in the private terminal." "You can't detain me," Martin said. The composure was holding, but it had changed texture, harder now, less comfortable. "I'm not detaining you," Nathan said. "The airport security team that's about to walk through that door is going to have questions about the forged executive credentials used to authorize this departure. That's between you and them." He looked at the 2 men near the tarmac door. "Your people should probably step away from the exit." Neither of them moved immediately. Nathan didn't look at them again. Looking at them would have made it a confrontation, and confrontations with uncertain outcomes were not what this moment needed. He just let the silence sit until one of them shifted weight, which was enough. The other followed. Martin Ashford looked at Nathan with the expression of a man revising several things simultaneously. "This won't hold," Martin said. His voice was still even, but the ease was gone from it. "You have a lock on an aviation system, some questions about credentials, and a theory. I have 18% of this company and 22 years of operational history. Do you understand what that means in a boardroom?" "I understand what it means," Nathan said. "But you've got a problem." "Which is?" "Victor Hale," Nathan said. Martin said nothing, but his jaw moved slightly, a compression, brief, involuntary. "He's been your operational piece inside the security division," Nathan said. "He's got the access logs, the credential trail, the communication records, all of it on company systems that your people haven't had time to scrub because this morning moved faster than you planned." He paused. "Hale is a careful man. Careful men make very detailed records. And detailed records, when they become evidence in a criminal investigation rather than a boardroom dispute, change the conversation considerably. The airport security team came through the main entrance behind Nathan. Two uniformed officers and a facility manager who looked like a man who had started the morning expecting a quiet Tuesday. Nathan stepped to the side and said to the facility manager quietly, "The woman seated in the blue chair is Olivia Ashford, CEO of the Ashford Group. She was transported here without her organization's knowledge using forged executive credentials. I have documentation of the credential forgery, the contractor ID forgery, and the authorization system breach. I'd like to make sure she can leave this facility freely while your team sorts out the rest." The facility manager looked at Martin Ashford, then at Nathan, then at Olivia, who had stood up and was straightening her jacket with the deliberate composure of someone reclaiming the shape of her own authority. "That's correct," Olivia said to the facility manager. Her voice was clear and level. "I'd like to leave." The facility manager nodded once and stepped aside. Nathan walked with Olivia through the terminal and out the front entrance into the morning air. Behind them, he could hear the facility manager beginning a conversation with Martin Ashford that Martin was not going to enjoy. Outside, Olivia stopped walking. She stood on the pavement for a moment and just breathed. Not dramatically, not in a way she'd have wanted anyone to make something of. She just stood there and let the air settle into her lungs and looked at the sky over the airport, which was going from gray to thin blue at the edges. Nathan stood nearby and didn't say anything. After a moment, she said, "My uncle." "Yes." "He's been doing this for how long?" Nathan thought about what he knew, what he could confirm, what was still inference. The infrastructure suggests at least 2 years, possibly longer. He had time to build it carefully. The contractors, the credentials, the insider relationships. Victor Hale didn't get turned overnight. Olivia was quiet. Nathan could see her processing it the way she processed everything. Not rushing, not avoiding, just taking the full weight of it and deciding where to put it. "What happens to Victor Hale?" she said. "That depends on how fast he talks," Nathan said. "And to who?" Derek appeared from the side of the building, his jacket slightly askew, phone already in hand. "Rachel's on the line," he said. "She says the 3 board members she contacted have pulled their support for the emergency provision vote. The quorum isn't there anymore." Olivia took that in. "The board meeting." "Still scheduled," Derek said, "but without the votes to trigger the emergency provision, it's just a regular meeting." She looked at Nathan. "You're still supposed to be removed from your position at that meeting." "Garrett is still going to push for it," Nathan said. "Let him push," Olivia said. Derek handed her his phone. Nathan watched her take it and put it to her ear and begin speaking to Rachel in the measured, specific language of a CEO who had just survived an attempt to remove her from her own company and was already thinking about what came next. Her voice didn't shake. Her hands were steady. She paced slightly, 3 steps left, 3 steps back, which was the only sign Nathan had ever observed that she was working through something that cost her something. He took a few steps away and called Emma. It was 9:51 a.m. She'd be in second period. He left a voicemail. "Hey, I know you're in school. I just wanted to—" He stopped, looked at the sky over the airport. "I wanted to say you were right about the job. I'll tell you the rest tonight. Be home by 6. I'll make something that isn't soup." He hung up and put his phone in his pocket. Derek appeared beside him. They stood in silence for a moment. "Hale," Derek said. "He was my director." "I know. I reported to him. I gave him briefings. Derek stopped. "Every update I gave him, he was passing along." "Probably," Nathan said. "I should have seen it." "He was careful," Nathan said. "And he was above you in the structure. You don't naturally suspect up." Derek's jaw worked. "I still should have seen it." Nathan didn't argue with that, because there was no version of you couldn't have known that was fully true, and Derek was smart enough to understand that. Some things you just had to carry the weight of without anyone lightening it for you. That was how it worked. "What you do with it now matters more than the fact that you missed it," Nathan said. "That's the only thing I can tell you." Derek nodded slowly. It wasn't absolution, and Nathan hadn't offered it as such. But Derek took it as what it was, a thing to work with. Olivia finished her call and walked back to where they were standing. She handed Derek his phone. Rachel's calling an extraordinary session of the board for this afternoon, she said. 3 o'clock. Not an emergency provision, a formal session with full documentation of the credential forgery, the relocation attempt, and the aviation authorization breach. She paused. Victor Hale is being contacted by the company's general counsel as of right now. They're advising him that his cooperation with the investigation will be taken into account. He'll talk, Nathan said. Rachel thinks so too. Olivia looked at him steadily. She says you told her to use her own board-level channel access to send a holding message. She did. She also recorded the credential pull, the forged authorization trail, and the full access log from the fleet monitoring system going back 92 days. Rachel's thorough, Nathan said. She is, Olivia agreed. She's also furious, which makes her faster. A pause. She found something else in the logs. Martin Ashford has been in contact with Victor Hale through a channel disguised as vendor communication for at least 19 months. The metadata trail is intact. 19 months. Nathan absorbed that. Long, careful, patient. The kind of thing you built when you were confident you had time. And when you were confident the person you were building it against didn't have someone like Nathan Cross in the room. It's enough, Nathan said. For a criminal investigation. That's not a boardroom problem anymore. Olivia nodded. She looked tired, the deep kind, the kind that didn't fix with sleep. But underneath it, she was steady in the way that Nathan had come to understand was simply who she was. Not invincible, just unwilling to stop. I owe you something I don't quite have words for, she said. You gave me a 7-day trial, Nathan said. That's enough. It's not even close to enough. It is, he said, quietly, but with enough weight that she let it sit. They stood there for a moment, 3 people in a parking lot outside an airport private terminal on a Tuesday morning that had started badly and was turning into something else. The thin blue at the edges of the sky was widening. A plane on the far end of the tarmac that was not going anywhere sat with its engine off, its crew waiting for a system lockdown to lift. Nathan's phone buzzed. Dwight Okafor, timing it precisely. 22 minutes. We're clear. I was never here. Nathan texted back 2 words and put his phone away. We should get back, Derek said. He had his jacket straightened now. His posture returned to something closer to its usual baseline. He looked tired too, and something else. The particular look of a man who had been through a day that had changed what he understood about the room he'd been standing in for years. Yes, Olivia said. They walked to the vehicles. Nathan drove alone, behind the other 2, taking the same expressway back toward the city while the morning continued its indifferent progress around him. Traffic, signals, the sound of the radio that he'd left on a station playing something instrumental and had never bothered to change. He thought about Victor Hale, who was currently sitting somewhere with a company attorney explaining his options. He thought about Martin Ashford, who was still in the private terminal working through the specific and unpleasant realization that the infrastructure he'd spent 19 months building had been unwound in under an hour. He thought about Carson Reeves, the fleet coordinator, who was almost certainly going to have a very difficult conversation with law enforcement before the day was out. And he thought about the afternoon board meeting and what it would mean to walk into a room of 9 people and lay out the full account of what had happened, not just in the past 10 days, but 11 years ago, a mission whose classified record had been deliberately falsified, a name that had been attached to a failure that wasn't his, a career ended by men who needed someone to absorb the consequence of their own corruption. He hadn't talked about it in 11 years. He'd told Olivia last night because the situation required it. He'd have to say it again, in detail, in a room where at least 2 people were already looking for reasons to dismiss him. He drove and let himself think about Marcus Webb, not the way he usually held the memory, at a distance, behind the wall, but actually think about him. Marcus, who had been from a small town in Georgia and had learned to love jazz in his 30s, and had a daughter the same age as Emma, and had the specific laugh of someone who found things funny that nobody else noticed yet, who had died in a corridor of a building in a country he can't name because the mission is still technically classified, because a man above him in a chain of command had decided that 19 months of profit was worth more than 6 lives. 4 of those 6 had made it out. Marcus hadn't. Nathan had spent 11 years carrying the weight of the 2 people on that list. Today, he thought, might be the beginning of putting some of it down. He took the exit back toward the financial district, toward the glass tower that had started all of this on an ordinary Tuesday morning that felt like it had happened to someone else entirely, and drove the rest of the way in the kind of silence that wasn't empty but wasn't quite ready to become words yet. The board meeting at 3 o'clock was not the kind Nathan had imagined when Olivia first mentioned it in her office the night before. He'd expected resistance. He'd expected Garrett to come in with his jaw set and his arguments prepared, and he'd expected at least 2 other directors to sit on that side of the table with their arms crossed and their minds already made up. What he hadn't expected was how quiet the room would be when he walked in. 9 people around a long table. Garrett on the left side, 2 directors flanking him who had been part of the push to remove Nathan from his position. Rachel Bennett at the far end with a laptop and a stack of printed documentation that she had organized with the particular precision of someone who understood that evidence only works if it's legible. Derek standing near the back wall, not seated, not quite part of the meeting, but present in a way that communicated clearly that he was not going to be absent from this. Olivia sat at the head of the table. She'd changed since the airport, different jacket, hair pulled back, and she looked composed in the way she always looked composed, which Nathan had learned meant something different than it appeared. It wasn't the absence of feeling. It was the decision to carry the feeling somewhere. It didn't interfere with what needed to happen next. Nathan sat where Rachel directed him, midway down the table, with the documentation she'd printed arranged in front of him. Garrett started talking before the meeting was formally opened. That was his way. Nathan had observed enough of him in the past 10 days to know that Garrett operated on the theory that whoever defined the frame of a conversation controlled its outcome. I was not entirely wrong about that. Before we address the credential investigation, Garrett said, looking at Olivia rather than Nathan, I want the record to reflect that this morning's events raise serious questions about the integrity of the security operation that's been running in this building for the past week and a half. A new director with an unverified background, unilateral decisions made without board consultation, and now an aviation lockdown at a private facility. Garrett, Olivia said. Not loud, just clear. He stopped. Nathan is going to speak first, she said. Then you can say whatever you need to say. Garrett looked like he was going to object, and then looked at the expressions of the other 8 people in the room and sat back. Nathan didn't stand. He'd thought about it and decided that standing felt like performance, and this was not a moment for performance. He put his hands flat on the table and looked at the documentation in front of him and then at the room. 11 years ago, he said, I led a classified 6-person extraction team. The location of our team was sold by a superior officer to a third party in exchange for money. 1 member of my team was killed during the breach. I was subsequently charged with dereliction of duty, abandoning my post, by the same command structure that arranged the breach. My service record was altered. The documentation that would have supported my account was either removed or changed. I was separated from service under a finding that was false. The room was quiet. I'm telling you this because the pattern I recognized in the Ashford Group security situation, the internal access, the careful timing, the use of trusted infrastructure to move against a specific target, is not unfamiliar to me. It is functionally the same architecture, different actors, different industry, same logic. Find the people who already have access and trust and use them as your mechanism. He opened the first section of Rachel's documentation and slid copies down the table. Victor Hale accessed Ms. Ashford's schedule through the fleet monitoring system on 14 separate occasions over the past 6 weeks, using timing windows specifically designed to stay below the automated anomaly threshold. He issued a forged executive relocation order this morning using his own credentials, coordinating with a contractor whose identification was built on a stolen identity from 14 months ago. Nathan paused. He did this because he was directed to by Martin Ashford, who has been running this operation for at least 19 months through a communication channel disguised as vendor correspondence. The metadata trail in that channel is intact. Rachel has the full documentation. Rachel tapped her laptop. The wall screen at the end of the room lit up with the communication logs, dates, timestamps, the thread of messages between Martin Ashford and Victor Hale moving through a vendor portal account that had been set up with a falsified business name. One of the directors across from Garrett said, "That's," and stopped. "It's real," Rachel said. "I pulled it from the company's vendor management system this morning. The account was opened 19 months ago by a shell entity incorporated in Delaware. The incorporation was dissolved 8 months ago, but the vendor portal account remained active because nobody flagged it for audit. Garrett's face had changed. He wasn't arguing anymore. He was reading the screen, and the expression on his face was the specific expression of a man who had been standing on ground he thought was solid and is watching it reclassify itself in real time. Victor Hale has been in contact with the company's general counsel since 10:30 this morning, Olivia said from the head of the table. He has agreed to a full cooperative account in exchange for consideration in the subsequent legal process. The account he has provided implicates Martin Ashford in conspiracy, fraud, evidence manipulation, and unauthorized access to proprietary executive systems. The director across from Garrett said, more quietly this time, "Your uncle." Olivia's expression didn't change. "My uncle," she confirmed. The room absorbed that. Nathan watched it move through the people around the table. The way information like that moves, not as a wave but as something heavier, settling unevenly into different corners depending on what each person had already understood and what they hadn't wanted to. Garrett said, after a long moment, "The motion to remove Mr. Cross from his position." He stopped, looked at the table. "I'd like to withdraw it." "It hasn't been formally entered," Olivia said. "I know," Garrett said. "I'm withdrawing it anyway." Nathan didn't say anything to that. There was nothing particularly useful to say. What came after that afternoon was not clean or fast, because these things never were. Victor Hale gave his full cooperative account over the following 2 days. 3 sessions with the company's legal team, 2 with external investigators, one that lasted until past midnight, and that Rachel sat through the entirety of because she was, as Nathan had observed, someone who finished things. Hale's account was detailed, specific, and consistent across all 3 sessions, which told Nathan that Hale had made a calculation some time ago about what would happen if the operation was ever exposed, and had kept records accordingly. Some people who got into situations like this were true believers. Victor Hale was not. He was a man who had made a transactional decision for transactional reasons and had kept his documentation careful because he knew, somewhere in the back of his mind, that transactional decisions had a way of becoming leverage later. He'd been right about that. It just wasn't the leverage he'd planned. Martin Ashford retained private counsel within hours of the airport incident and said nothing publicly for 11 days. Then the external investigation, a firm engaged by the Ashford Group's independent board directors, issued a preliminary findings report that was not made public, but whose existence was noted in a regulatory filing that the financial press spent 3 days analyzing at length. After that, Martin's counsel issued a 1-paragraph statement that said nothing and confirmed everything. He was removed from the board by unanimous vote 17 days after the airport. The criminal investigation that followed was handled by people whose jurisdiction and process Nathan followed from a deliberate distance, because there was a point past which his involvement served the outcome and a point past which it didn't, and he'd learned the difference. Carson Reeves, the fleet coordinator whose access log had been Nathan's first confirmed thread, turned out to be a more complicated story than Nathan had initially read him as. He hadn't been recruited by Hale. He'd been approached by a third-party intermediary 6 months earlier, told he was participating in an internal audit process, and had been providing schedule access data without fully understanding what he was providing it for or to whom. The investigation confirmed this. It didn't fully exonerate him. He'd been careless with access that required care, and that had consequences. But it was a different thing than deliberate betrayal, and Nathan thought about that distinction more than he expected to in the weeks that followed. It was harder to hate a story like that. Easier, almost, to hate a clean villain. A man who'd been deceived into being useful to people he didn't know was a more uncomfortable kind of story because it didn't resolve neatly. It just sat there, asking you to think about all the ways ordinary people get leveraged into things they didn't mean to be part of. The question of Nathan's military record moved through a different process, slower, more bureaucratic, more dependent on people whose job it was to review things rather than change them. Rachel had flagged it in her documentation. The credential falsification, the command record that didn't match the operational timeline, the specific absence of documents that should have been present in Nathan's separation file. She'd flagged it not because Nathan had asked her to, but because she was the kind of person who, having found something that needed to be corrected, corrected it. An independent review was opened by the Service Branch's Inspector General office. Nathan gave a recorded account. Two of the four surviving members of his extraction team, who had spent 11 years under the same cloud he had, gave separate accounts that corroborated his in every material detail. The superior officer who had sold their location had retired 6 years ago and had spent those 6 years apparently operating on the assumption that the matter was permanently resolved. It was not permanently resolved. The formal finding came on a Thursday morning, 10 weeks after the airport. Nathan was in the kitchen making coffee when Rachel called him. "It's done," she said. He stood with the coffee in his hand and looked at the kitchen wall, which was the same kitchen wall it had always been. A small crack in the plaster near the window he'd been meaning to fix for 2 years. A hook where Emma had hung her backpack every day from age 7 to 14 and then stopped because she'd decided it looked like something a little kid would do. "All of it," he said. "All of it," Rachel said. "Dereliction finding vacated. Service record corrected. The falsification of documentation by the commanding officer has been referred for a separate accountability process." A pause. "Nathan, your record is clean." He didn't say anything for a moment. "Are you there?" Rachel asked. "Yeah," he said. "I'm here." He thanked her and hung up and stood in the kitchen for a long time. The coffee went lukewarm. He didn't notice. He thought about Marcus Webb, not about the night of the mission, that memory he'd mostly learned to file without reopening it, but about the years before, the particular texture of knowing someone well enough that their absence left a shape in the air. The things Marcus would have said about this moment, which would probably have involved jazz and a mild profanity, and the specific laugh that nobody else had. Nathan let himself sit with that for a while without trying to move past it, which was different from how he'd handled it for 11 years, and he was slowly understanding, probably healthier. Emma was at school. He didn't call her immediately. He wanted to tell her in person, and also he needed a few hours to decide what he was going to say, because he hadn't told Emma everything about those 11 years. Had told her what a father tells a 6-year-old, then a 10-year-old, then a teenager, calibrating the story to what she could hold at the age she was. She was 17 now, and fully capable of holding all of it, and had been for a while. And Nathan had kept calibrating anyway out of a habit that was probably more about protecting himself than protecting her. He'd tell her tonight. The whole thing. He fixed the crack in the plaster wall that afternoon. It took 40 minutes and was not a particularly clean repair, but it was done. 3 weeks after the formal finding, Olivia called Nathan into her office. She'd reorganized the space slightly since the board meeting. Different configuration of the chairs, the desk at a slightly different angle. Small things that suggested a person who had reassessed their relationship with the room they occupied every day. The city through the window was going into the slower rhythm of a late afternoon in autumn. The light lower and more angled than it had been on the Tuesday morning when Nathan had first come to this building in his gray jacket and his scuffed boots and put Derek Kane on the floor in 7 seconds. Olivia was at her desk when Nathan came in. She looked like herself. The sharpness was still there, and so was the tiredness underneath it, though the texture of the tiredness had changed. It was the fatigue of someone coming through something rather than someone bracing for what came next. "Sit down," she said. He sat. She put a folder on the desk and slid it toward him. He opened it and looked at the contents. An offer letter, formal, with specific language around the position title, authority scope, compensation structure, and terms. Executive Director of Security Operations, Ashford Group, permanent appointment. Full authority over the security division and its personnel, independent reporting directly to the CEO. Compensation that was, by any reasonable measure, extraordinary. Nathan read it carefully because that was how he read things. "This is more than I asked for," he said. "You didn't ask for anything," Olivia said. "That's what I mean." She was watching him with the particular quality of attention she brought to things she'd already thought through from multiple angles. "You've earned it," she said. Specifically, structurally, actually, not as an expression of gratitude. The security division needs a permanent leader who knows what happened here and why, and who built the systems we're running now. That's you. Nathan set the folder down on the desk. "I'm not going to take it," he said. Olivia was quiet for a moment. "Walk me through your reasoning." "You almost lost your company," Nathan said. "You came very close to losing a great deal more than that. And the people who tried to take it from you, some of the mechanism they used was access. Information. knowing what you were doing and when, and using that to position against you. He paused. If I stay in this role, everything I know about your operations, your movements, your security architecture becomes something that could be used against you too. Not by me, but I'm one decision or one bad circumstance away from becoming a variable you'd have to manage around. And you don't need another variable. Olivia looked at him steadily. You're saying you can't protect me and remain employed by me at the same time. I'm saying my judgment about your safety works better when it doesn't have a financial stake attached to it. That's a very rigid way to think about. It's the way I think about it, Nathan said simply and without apology. Other people might be fine in that arrangement. I know how I work. She was quiet for a moment. He could see her deciding whether to push back further. She was someone who pushed back, it was part of how she thought, and then deciding against it, which took its own kind of discipline. Derek, Nathan said. He's the right person for the permanent role. Olivia's eyebrow moved slightly. He was Hale's deputy. He was, and he missed things he should have caught. He'll tell you that himself. He's been telling himself that every day since the airport, and I know because he looks like someone carrying something they haven't put down yet. Nathan paused. That's exactly why he's the right person. He knows precisely how this division got compromised. He knows the gaps, the assumptions, the habits that made it possible. And he cares about it now in a way that is different from caring about it professionally. That's not a small thing. Olivia considered that. You'd recommend him. Unreservedly. She was quiet for a moment, looking at the folder. And you? What do you do? Nathan thought about that. It was a genuine question, and it deserved a genuine answer rather than a modest deflection. There are a lot of organizations that need someone who can look at a security structure and find where it's been compromised, he said. Not all of them can afford it. Some of them, nonprofits, smaller operations, veteran-run businesses that get targeted because people assume they're easier. Some of them have real exposure and no resources to address it. He paused. I've been thinking about what that looks like as a practice. Independent, fee structures that accommodate who I'm working with. Another pause. Marcus Webb had a daughter named Clara. She's 23 now. She's studying urban policy and volunteers with a veteran transition organization on weekends. She doesn't know that her father's name is on a corrected service record now. I'd like to be the one to tell her. Olivia looked at him for a long moment without saying anything. It was a look that Nathan recognized. Not pity, not sentimentality, but the expression of someone seeing a full picture of another person for the first time after knowing them only in partial views. You've thought about all of this, she said. I've had a lot of mornings, Nathan said. She looked at the folder again, then closed it. The offer stands, she said, in whatever form is useful to you. If you set up an independent practice, the Ashford Group will be your first client. That's fair, Nathan said. Olivia leaned back slightly in her chair. The city moved behind her in the window, ordinary and continuous. The Veteran Transition Program, she said. The board approved the establishment of a foundation in memory of your teammate. We're going to call it the Webb Foundation. Funding for career transition services for veterans leaving service under complicated circumstances, records disputes, administrative separations, anything that leaves people in the category you were in. She paused. It won't fix what happened to him. Or to you. Nothing fixes that, Nathan said, but it does something. Yes, Olivia said quietly. It does something. He stood, and she stood, and for a moment they were just two people in a room at the end of something long and difficult, which was also, depending on how you looked at it, the beginning of something. She extended her hand. He shook it. Thank you, she said, for not walking away. I almost did, Nathan said. A couple of times. I know. Her eyes were steady. I'm glad you didn't. He nodded once and walked out. Derek was in the hallway, not waiting, exactly, more standing near the elevator with the look of someone who had been told to wait and was pretending he hadn't been. She offer you the permanent position? Derek said. Yes? You said no. Yes. Derek looked at the ceiling briefly. You recommended me. Don't make it a thing. I'm not making it a thing, Derek said, though he clearly was, a little. Why? After everything. Because you know what went wrong and you won't let it go wrong the same way again, Nathan said. That's the only qualification that matters for this job right now. Derek was quiet for a moment. I missed a lot. Hale was right in front of me for 4 years. Yes, Nathan said, and you know it, and you'll never be comfortable enough in this building to miss it again. He paused. That's the qualification. Derek looked like he was going to say something and then didn't. Then he said, "You're a strange person to work with, you know that?" "I've been told," Nathan said. He took the elevator down and walked through the lobby and out through the main entrance into the street, which was in the full swing of late afternoon. People moving with the specific velocity of a day winding toward its end, everyone with somewhere to be. Nathan stood on the pavement for a moment and let it move around him, which he did sometimes, just standing in the middle of the ordinary world long enough to remember it was there. His phone buzzed. "Emma, you coming home for dinner?" He looked at the message and felt something settle in his chest that didn't have a precise name, but was somewhere in the neighborhood of right. Not fixed, not finished, just oriented correctly, pointing in a direction that was forward rather than the endless circling he'd done for 11 years around the same two coordinates, the mission and the loss and the weight of both. "Yeah," he typed back. "Already heading out. I have something to tell you." Her response came in under 10 seconds. Good something or bad something? He stood on the sidewalk in the autumn light with his phone in his hand and thought about a corrected service record and a foundation named for a man with a specific laugh and a 17-year-old who had submitted a job application on her father's behalf without asking permission and had been right about it. "Good something," he typed. "See you at 6. He put his phone in his pocket and started walking. Not toward anything dramatic, not away from anything, just walking through a city that didn't know his name and didn't need to, toward a small apartment with a patched wall and a cold coffee he'd forgotten on the counter that morning, toward a daughter who was going to make him tell the whole story from the beginning and would not accept a summarized version. Some people spend their whole lives waiting for the moment when the weight they've been carrying gets officially acknowledged as real. When someone in a position to say this was wrong, and we're saying so, finally says it. Nathan had waited 11 years for that, and he understood, walking down that street, that the acknowledgement mattered. It had mattered more than he'd let himself believe it would. During the years when he'd been telling himself it didn't matter at all, that he'd moved on, that the past was a fixed thing that didn't require anything from the present. That wasn't true. It had never been true. The past required acknowledgement the way wounds required air. You couldn't just seal it over and call it healed. But acknowledgement wasn't the end of the story either. It was just the moment when you stopped being trapped in the story and started being able to move through it. That was the thing Nathan hadn't understood until now. Not that the past would go away, but that it could stop being the place where he was always standing, the ground he was always standing on, the thing that made every room feel like a room he was still trying to get out of. He could carry Marcus Webb without being crushed by him. He could remember the mission without living inside it permanently. He could be the person who had been through that, and also the person who was walking down a street on a Thursday afternoon in autumn, heading home to have dinner with his daughter and tell her something good. Those things could coexist. He was learning that. Slowly, imperfectly, in the way all real learning happens. Not all at once, not cleanly, but accumulating. The way water accumulates in a container you hadn't noticed was empty until it started to fill. He turned down the block toward the parking structure where his car was and thought about Clara Webb, who didn't know yet that her father's name had been restored. He would find her. He'd call the transition organization she volunteered with, introduce himself, ask to meet somewhere quiet. He'd tell her the full account, the way it actually happened, not the version the falsified record had told for 11 years. He'd give her that. It wouldn't bring Marcus back. There was nothing in the world that did that particular thing, but it would give Clara something real to hold. The truth of who her father had been, uncorrupted, correct, belonging to her. Sometimes that was what you could do for someone. Sometimes that was enough. The parking structure was dim and smelled like exhaust and concrete. Nathan's car was on the second level, where he'd left it early that morning in what felt now like a different chapter of something. He got in, adjusted the mirror out of habit, and sat for a moment before starting the engine. Outside the structure's open side, the city in late afternoon light was doing what cities do. Enormous and indifferent and full of people working through their own versions of the things that were hard and the things that mattered, and the long, slow work of figuring out which was which. Nathan started the car. He drove home.